The tyranny of potential. Some of the most miserable people are not those who lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity. Ironically, they are often those who possess an abundance of it. They are told from a young age that they are gifted, capable, and destined for greatness. It's what they know growing up. Teachers tell them they have potential. Parents tell them they can become anything. Friends admire what they might achieve. Over time, a dangerous idea begins to emerge. Who they are becomes less important than who they can become. This is the tyranny of potential. Potential is often celebrated as an unquestionable good. It represents possibility, ambition, and hope. Yet potential has a darker side that is rarely discussed. It can become a burden so heavily that it overshadows the present. Instead of motivating growth, it creates anxiety. Instead of inspiring action, it creates paralysis. Instead of helping people achieve their abilities, it causes them to constantly measure themselves against an imaginary future version of themselves. You don't enjoy the things in the moment. You feel like you're always so stressed about what could be instead of what is. You start thinking about how good that outcome could have been, maybe how good it should have been, and it didn't end up being that way. And now you just can't appreciate what is actually going on. What happened in that moment, the result you got, you can't appreciate it because you were so busy thinking about what result you could have gotten. An example, some people, they'll get a 95 knowing that they could have got 100. So they never appreciate that 95 because you're always thinking about the 100. The greatest prison is not always failure. Sometimes it is possibility. One reason potential becomes tyrannical is because of the way the human mind interprets reality. Human beings have a tendency to separate the world into opposing categories. We divide people into winners and losers, smart and foolish, successful and unsuccessful. This tendency simplifies a complicated world, but it also distorts it. Our minds, we're not able to understand that there's so many different possibilities and outcomes for things. We always want to make it into two simple things. And the biggest example of that is good and evil, success and failure. We don't understand a middle ground. We don't see a middle ground. That's why people are asking you, hey, how are you doing? What's your job right now? And you tell them something that may not be the greatest job in the world, and they kind of side-eye you a little bit, are like, oh, okay. Because a lot of people don't understand that there's a building block. They just think there's the beginning and the end. They forget that there's that middle part, the journey where you're traveling. If we reach our goal, we are successful. If we do not, we are failures. What is often ignored is the vast territory that exists between these extremes. Like I said before, people don't want to acknowledge the middle ground. They don't see the journey. They see the beginning and the end. Either you make it or you don't. That's the way they categorize it. A student who earns good grades but not perfect grades may feel like a failure. An entrepreneur who builds a stable business but never becomes wealthy may feel unsuccessful. An athlete who competes at a high school but never becomes a champion may believe they fell short. In reality, none of these people have failed. Yet, because their minds understand only the categories of success and failure, they struggle to recognize the value of everything that exists between them. We get so used to hearing that. We get so used to seeing the highlights of the greats. We get so used to seeing the big speeches of people that have done it all, to where we forget that there's that middle area. I'm going to say the word middle a lot because it is the truth. That's the middle ground. And sometimes the middle ground it's not even the middle ground. It's success. It's your own version of success. But we just don't acknowledge that anymore. Like we see people streaming and all that. We see all this stuff and we think either you're broke or you're a millionaire. And that's in modern times as well. Either you're broke or you're making $1 million. That's why we treat a lot of people. The terms brokey, stuff like that. Sorry, I'm getting in some Gen Z terms, but I got fired up with that. Potential thrives in the black and white thinking. When someone imagines their highest possible future, every present accomplishment begins to feel inadequate. If they become 90% of what they hope to be, their mind focuses on the missing 10%. They do not compare themselves to when they started. They compare themselves to perfection. That's why they say, like, you don't ever really think about all the things you've done already, that you've conquered, how far you've come. You never think about it because you're so far. You're always looking ahead. You're always looking at that finish line, what that finish line may be, how great it may be, that you don't even know how far you've gone, where you are now. This results in permanent dissatisfaction. No achievement is enough because there's always a greater version of themselves waiting in their imagination. The gifted student wonders why they're not the best. The charismatic speaker wonders why they're not the most influential. The athlete wonders why they are not stronger, faster, or more accomplished. Potential transforms accomplishment into deficiency. Every victory becomes evidence of what still remains unfinished. This creates a strange form of guilt. Most guilt originates from something we have done. The guilt created by potential comes from something we have not done. It whispers constantly, you should be doing more. You should be working harder. You should be further ahead. You should become someone greater. Accusation never ends because potential itself has no endpoint. There's always another skill to develop, another opportunity to pursue, another version of yourself to chase. Our mind, our imagination, it just keeps going higher and higher. There is no endpoint. There is no endpoint with our mind. And we see that as we start becoming more successful, we start doing things better and we become better. Our mind just keeps going higher and higher with, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Something's always in your mind possible of happening to where we are never really just like, well, what has already happened? The modern world intensifies this problem. Through social media and constant connectivity, we are exposed to extraordinary individuals every day. We see entrepreneurs become millionaires in their 20s, athletes breaking records, creators gaining millions of followers, professionals reaching heights we never imagined. Every scroll introduces another example of what is possible in this world. As a result, potential is no longer measured against our own circumstances. It is measured against the achievements of millions of strangers. The gap between who we are and who we think we should be continues to grow. Yet, perhaps the greatest tragedy of potential is that it often prevents action altogether. People assume that potential creates motivation, but the opposite can be true. When the ideal future becomes too important, every step towards it feels inadequate. The aspiring writer fears producing imperfect work. The entrepreneur fears launching an imperfect idea. The student fears making mistakes. We go into things and we're like, well, what if it's not amazing? What if I post this video and I don't get millions of views? What if I give this speech and not everyone loves it? And stuff like that, it could get in our head and it could start stressing us out and it can make us just not want to do it at all. It can make us just walk away and not do it or hold off so much because we're trying to plan too hard and we never actually hit the mark. We never launch during the time we were supposed to. And now that opportunity is gone. Now that moment's gone because we spent too much time stressing and worrying and just trying to overplan on it. Rather than risk being imperfect, they choose not to begin. Potential becomes a dream preserved rather than a reality pursued. Something we talk about. You hear people talking about these things as time goes on. They're like, oh, well, I always wanted to do this. Oh, I wanted to do this. But they didn't do it because they were fearing the idea of it not being perfect the way they imagined it to be, which nothing ever is perfect the way we thought it was going to be. There's always going to be little switches, little times that things just aren't amazing, but that's what makes it perfect in its own way, is that it becomes its own thing, that there's actually reality happening within that. The solution is not to abandon ambition. Ambition is valuable. Growth is valuable. Goals are valuable. The problem emerges when potential becomes identity. A healthy life requires acceptance of something many people resist. Not every possibility deserves to be pursued. To choose one path is to abandon countless others. To become one version of yourself is to allow others to disappear. That is not failure, it is maturity. The tragedy of modern life is not that people fail to reach their potential. It is that many spend their lives worshiping a future version of themselves while neglecting the person they already are. Between success and failure lies an enormous middle ground filled with growth, effort, learning, mistakes, and meaningful achievement. Yet, because our minds crave simple categories, we often overlook it. We judge ourselves not by purpose, but by the distance that remains. The tyranny of potential ends when we recognize that our own worth cannot be determined solely by what we might become. Potential is a beautiful thing, don't get me wrong. It gives us direction and purpose, but it becomes dangerous when it convinces us that our value only is in the future and not in the present. At some point, we must stop chasing the person we can be long enough to appreciate the person we already are.